Yep, they did.
Hey, we used to say, welcome to summertime. Although here in Northern California, in the San Francisco Bay Area, it's January. It is cold and damp this morning. I had to turn the heat on. It's just in the low 50s. Thomas, you're outside. It looks like it's pretty nice. Oh, hey, Tom.
Can't hear you, Tom.
You're muted.
You're muted.
Audio, no audio.
You're muted.
There I am. Who
There he is.
muted me?
There he is.
There you are.
Must have done that accidentally. But actually, there's some patches of blue coming out now.
No, yeah.
It's a May gray morning.
May gray.
Yeah. I explained to Frank that and Bob, I think, that house cleaners, we have professional house cleaners here for contracting for 3 hours. The house really so much needs it, and they're doing a very in-depth job, it looks like. But so now I'm relegated to the outdoors, but it's kind of nice out here.
It is.
It's a nice backyard.
You must have a good plug back there.
In Irvine, we're 61, 62 degrees and overcast.
Yeah, it's in the 60s here.
Wow,
And-
it's warmer in Boston. It's 67.
Oh, yeah.
And partial sun.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Pretty humid, Frank.
Huh?
Well,
Pretty humid. Is it pretty
No.
humid?
No, not at all humid.
Wow, that's
In fact,
great.
it's chilly. It's chilly.
Isn't that interesting? Since we're doing the cross-country weather report, how are things in the Midwest, Bob?
Midwest is 70s.
70s.
70, just late upper 60s into the 70s.
Much humidity with that, or is it still early?
No, not today. Sun's out, sky is the light blue. Very nice.
Right. The jungle scene behind you, or the tall grass scene, do you know where that's from?
Haven't the slightest idea.
It
He's
just
a
looks,
man, and he's in
it
a
looks good.
place of grass. So all that grass is really his.
Yeah,
Well,
it does look good.
Here.
Yeah, I must admit, it looks better like a big institutional light hanging in the ceiling.
Oh, there might be a fish back there, and that it's some water. Some fish. I haven't caught the fish yet, though.
Never can tell. Ned,
Yes. Sir.
any updates on Betty and the family and the bishop and the funeral and all of that?
Well, let me tell you what Betty and I cooked up yesterday. We're going to be singing together the first hymn, Pescador de Hombres, before Mass starts. We'll go up to the choir loft and we'll sing, and she's going to harmonize. We haven't practiced together yet. We're going to do some of that today. She found a really great, I think, rendition of the song. It's a little slower than most that you hear, but it's just beautiful. It's orchestrated with or by symphony orchestra level instruments and musicians. It's just wonderful, and it's slow. And I thought that it was consistent with the way George hears that song, or himself. Every word means or meant something to him, especially Señor, me has mirado a los ojos. that thing always broke him up. Lord, you have looked into my eyes. He mirado, you looked, you saw, you knew me, and then boom, it just kind of hits you. Sonriendo, smiling at me. Has dicho mi nombre. You have said, you have spoken my name, and then it goes from there. Anyway, I hope that's going to be good. We have not practiced together. We hope to do that tomorrow. And so immediately after that, we're going to run down and get to the what do we call it? The way at the back of the church.
And they're going.
The back of the church.
Back of the church.
Yeah,
And-
back of the church is good.
There will be a procession that will have formed. I'm going to be a pallbearer. There will be 8 pallbearers. And we'll put the pall down, and the bishop will say some prayers. And then we'll process up the middle aisle to the altar. We'll have 3 readings. Those that I think I sent you. Have you all gotten those? Or Tom probably sent them
Yeah.
to you. Yeah, he did. Matter
I
of
think
fact,
both of us did.
yeah, we were quite insistent that you guys see those.
Just last.
The first 2 are
It was his best
speak
friend.
about the
His best.
the tears from our eyes, those suffering, and that's one of those, the one from Revelation that George was talking about on that during that Wednesday sort of homily that we all participated in.
Mhm.
And, pardon?
I just had,
And, okay, and Bishop Barnes has agreed to be the homilist. Boy, that was not the easiest thing in the world to get him to agree to that. He kept wanting others, and so I kept proposing others, and either they couldn't do it or they wouldn't do it. I asked Gary, and Gary said he really didn't feel competent given the number of years that had elapsed between our Fratelli meeting reunion and the last time that he'd spoken with George. And
That just one tiny bit.
I really wanted, frankly,
There.
Tom to do it. And finally, Bishop Barnes said, I'll do it. So he'll do it, and we'll go through Mass. And then there will be 3 eulogists. I'm sure you've heard this before. A young, I was going to say young man, but no. He's a partially retired, very accomplished lawyer whom George and I taught in high school at Salesian High School in Boyle Heights, East Los Angeles, who was just one of the vatos, you know, but a very, very bright vato. And he went to Yale undergrad and Yale law, and came back and became a very accomplished lawyer. He's now retired from running the Small Business Administration in Southern California, and is working for a very large bank. And he will do the first eulogy. We have been limited, I think I've mentioned to you, to 5 minutes apiece. There'll be 3 of us. I don't think that's any time to say anything. So it's going to be bullet points. My wife keeps saying, just give them bullet points. And that just doesn't sound to me like a kind of, conversational, warm, communication of who this guy was. But something.
Now, if I may interject, my suggestion would be to just tell one story and kind of, try to capture George a little bit in the introduction to the story and the conclusion. But one story will get everybody's interest and kind of, with 5 minutes, you want to leave them hungry for more. But you don't want to oversatisfy them until you've got, half the people are looking at their watch and the other half are snoring. But
Tom,
I agree
story.
with that, Tom. I think Tom is absolutely right. There's no need for biography. People know George. And I think a story that tells how George touched your life or the life of someone else you know.
Mhm.
Those are the most effective memorials that are given, not one that says, well, he got out of college and he did this and he did that and he did the other thing. It's just the story that touches people because it passes on something of his spirit to them. And 5 minutes is approximately 450 words on the computer.
wow. Frank, I wrote about 4 or 5 pages of stuff. Started with meeting him in the seminary, which was to me hilarious. He was. We were at freshmen in.
Excuse me, but the sun has just come out here.
Yay!
You see the
Hey, that's
difference?
because you're sitting out there.
Hey, we have
Right.
no sun over here. It's
Right,
all
it's-
cloud. and
It's reflecting off my baldness here.
you better put your head on.
How come I don't have it? I don't have any sun yet.
Nor do I, Norman.
Soon, Norm.
The first time I met George, we were at a table for dinner. The first day that about 100 guys came to the seminary as freshmen, junior seminary, freshmen in high school, and we introduced ourselves, and he said his name was Crook, and I looked at him and I said, "Your name is Crook?" I said that to myself, and then he proceeded to take the pepper and just pelt his food with tons of pepper. And I looked at him and he looked up and he said, I do something like, I do a lot of other weird and famous things. The whole table just cracked up. I was going to tell that story. I probably won't now because I read what I had to Darlene, and the first page took almost 3.5, almost 4 minutes.
Right.
I thought, whoa, this is
Right.
impossible. So
Right.
I came to somewhat the conclusion that both you all have told me. And one story, hopefully that's a grabber, that where they can see who he is internally, mind, heart, spirit, because that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to, Alberto will talk about for 5 minutes how he touched all of those young men at Salesian High School, of which he is a leader, a very big lead. He'll probably bring, I don't know, 40, 50 students, former students, now accomplished working men, probably retired, to the Mass. And then I'm supposed to talk, or she wanted me she said, show them his spirituality. show them how much he loved Jesus.
Mm.
Okay. And for 5 minutes. And then an atheist friend, really wonderful, gentle, generous man who was his former partner, man by the name of Bob Kerr, will have the last 5 minutes. And that pretty much will be it. We have singing throughout the Mass at the appropriate times. And then we'll repair to the cemetery, and there will be singing. There will be a mariachi. George loved mariachis. And we were told that we could only have 3 songs. We could only play 3 songs. And Bishop Barnes says, play as many as you want. You know, sing and be happy and send him off. And if anybody wants to stay for, you know, the lowering of the casket, you can do that.
Mhm.
We can throw dirt in there, and we can see him go and remember that he's dust unto dust, you know. And then we're going to a place called the Quiet Cannon, which is in it's a schlep from Glendale. It's in Montebello, and we'll have some.
It's actually nearer the cemetery, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. So cemetery, and then from there a small jump to Quiet Cannon, and there Alberto, I've asked Alberto to grab the mic toward the end when everybody seems to be, you know, filled with enough of it, you know, and ask if anybody wants to make some final remarks. He's a funny, witty, smart guy, and he'll do a good job, I think.
Mhm.
And that's the end of it. Betty has been wonderful, really, throughout this. When we talk, there are 3 or 4 interruptions for a sob or 2, and then right back to work. And one of her girlfriends asked her, "How are you going to get through Pescador de Hombres? You know, you sure you can get through it?" And I told her, when I am practicing it, you know, singing it for myself, preparing, I can't get through it without breaking down. And I've got to create within me an attitude that, while it's still attentive to what I'm doing, is at some distance, so that I can, you know, stay together. We'll have Paul Dotson, I hope, Tom, Norm,
Gary Lombardi.
Yeah, Gary, and finally, what's his name? Parker Sandoval, as con celebrants. Parker will read the prayers after the gospel. And I don't know what else to tell you. Any questions?
You know, we were talking about eulogies. One of the most effective ones I ever heard was given by a 20-year-old man talking about his father. And he said, "I shadowed him. He taught me to hunt. He taught me to fish. He taught me to do carpentry. He taught me to do plumbing. But in all of that, what he really taught me was how to listen." And I didn't hear anything else that the young man said. I thought he could have stopped right there. He didn't need 5 minutes. Another grandchild got up and said that her grandfather, who was 96, had been in the army in Houston in the 50s or something. And he was on a bus with another guy. They were out for the day. And a pregnant black woman got on the bus. And he got up, motioned to offer her seat. And she said, no, 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 no. So he stood up and he said, my mother would never forgive me if I didn't stand up for you. And when she sat down, all of the other people on the bus started attacking him because he gave his seat to a black woman.
God.
Oh, my.
So those, I mean, I remember those long funerals, you see.
Yeah.
So they captured in less than 5 minutes, actually, the meaning of the person.
Wow.
The other thing is, there's that old saying, I will forget what you say, but I will never forget how you made me feel.
Yeah.
And a lot of, pay some attention to that, how George made you feel, and share with us, how you feel, because that will then make, that will include us in the feeling. The feeling is your primary memory.
Yeah.
Hey, Frank, not that you need one more thing to do, but if you have the opportunity to spend a little time at the seminary, St. John the 20th, and there's anything like an applied or a sort of clinical applied, how to do a homily.
Yeah.
Even a couple of sessions, if they were smart enough to invite you to come in with your experience at this point, I would imagine it would be a very rich experience. And boy, do they need to have people who know how to proclaim the word, 5 to 8 minutes or so, the way you clearly illustrate, at least for me. So, not that you need to do one more thing, right?
No, I would love to do it, but of course there are some people there, given my history, who would be a little afraid I might taint the candidates.
Oh, jeez.
What?
Less them and more.
Of course, you're talking to the wrong guy right now.
Well, of course, I know I'm talking
Please,
with.
God, taint the candidates. Do they need tainting?
Anyway, thanks, Bob. It's nice of you to say that.
Yeah. On another, just related to that, in the last couple of weeks, Judge Ferrick and I have been going back and forth, sort of an in-house conversation with quote, the father of the clinical pastoral education movement. A lot of Catholic priests don't know about it, but a lot of them do. And that's looking at how to do a human theological reflection or humanizing theology. Anton Boyson was his name. And my connection with him, I did a quarter of CPE back in the early 60s, back in the late 60s at Worcester State Hospital. He's unique in that he was a patient at Worcester State Hospital and then became the chaplain at Worcester State Hospital. So did he know the inner workings? And he has a statement in his writings, reading the living human document, which is an absolutely beautiful understanding of what I think theology is about truly, but isn't often explicated. You start with the human experience. You start with the birth of Jesus. You start with the human experience, and then you can move on, unless you've done that. or that variation, Augustine, not always my favorite theologian, but when he says, noverimne, noverimte, let me know myself, let me know you, captures that understanding at any rate. So I went off on a tangent, but that's okay.
Not really.
I hope they're smart enough to
was
invite you anyway.
Excellent, thank you. Unfortunately, all that kind of stuff doesn't seem to fit that well in the direction the modern seminaries are going.
That's an understatement.
Yeah,
What is it, on the drain? Or what?
What, Fred, would you say?
What's the status of the modern?
Oh, yeah.
well, I think they're becoming, more producing more of the trad-oriented folks.
Oh, boy.
What was the word you used?
Trad.
Trad,
Traditional.
traditionalists.
Okay.
If you're real-
I just see so much, how would I say, subtle, but not really terribly subtle influence of Opus Dei.
No.
And I think some of their spirituality is good, but so much of it, just rejects everything that has happened since then, since Jose Maria. I don't know. It seems to be infiltrating our seminaries, certainly here in LA.
It's
It
interesting
doesn't
because,
seem to be, it is.
It is, okay. Thank you, Norm.
we
It
had
is.
we had the 5 newly ordained from Boston. They were ordained last Saturday here on Monday to offer mass. It was very interesting to see how the rubrics of the traditional liturgy kind of sneak in to the Novus Ordo. So, for example, the fingers together, the hands like this, and the elevation. The word elevation doesn't appear in the rubrics of the Novus Ordo. It says show it to the people.
Yeah.
But because elevation was designed when your back was to the people, you had to show it to them by lifting it up.
Yeah.
But it's those kinds of subtle things and messages that get sent that makes one think that, as Archbishop Dearman Martin, the former Archbishop of Dublin, said upon meeting, having dinner with 3 of his newly ordained, which was a huge class for Dublin, it said that there were men who were prepared for another era.
Wow.
Prepared for another era. Well, I have a trivial question. When you talked about Alberto, Ned, you
Yes.
said Alberto, and I remembered Father Bard saying "Be chica, be grande."
Yep.
I've been more aware of that because I had a kid in my big God, Self, and Society class named Vladimir.
Vladimir. Wow. Wow.
Ned, to just double back, as Fred sort of set me up there. I love the short time that I have known Judge Crook. The pepper story speaks to me. So and is that, if you make a connection between the pepper story and his peppered spirituality, I suspect you'd cover all the bases, and people would, and you could do that like in 5 minutes or so. My God, you'd have them, and it's because it's so personal to you, and it's such a human story that captures his peppery personality. That's my image, and so you don't need to say anything else. I mean, if you just say that, and if you want to, make a little connection with, how God is in that, and in that experience, literally, fired him up, heated him up. for
You know,
a life of service.
really, Bob, really, I've been playing with that. Very much. Pepper is perfect, I think, for the myriad things that George was into, for the fervor that he got into stuff. His life was formed when he was a little boy, and his mom and dad explained to him how things were for the coal miners in Pennsylvania and how things were for the poor in the plains of Oklahoma. And Goldie Glenn taught him to read very early. And I don't know, he was 5 years old, 4 years old. And by the time I met him, he was a dyed-in-the-wool Franklin Delano Roosevelt was a saint, an absolute Episcopalian saint, you know? He did what nobody even thought of doing. He took that big government and he put it to work in a way that brought us out of the Depression and saved us during World War II. You know, that was George. Everything else emanates from that. His tenderness, his compassion, his breadth of vision, everything else just radiates from that.
Stubbornness too, I would imagine.
Yeah, you know, keep going when they keep telling him not to. You know, I remember one day these kids at Salesian High School were tough guys. You know, they were brighter than a lot of the folks in Boyle Heights. This was a dicey immigrant community. And three of them, he was, sometimes he'd assert himself maybe a little bit too much. And there were guys there that didn't like that. You know, who is this white dude coming in here and telling us, short guy, you know, telling us how it is. And three of them, basketball players, decided that they were going to intimidate him. And starting from one end of the hall of the second floor, they began to walk locked arms forward as George was coming at them. And George had his briefcase with him. And as soon as he got a couple of feet from them, he pulled back that case and just rammed as hard as he could and hit the nuts of the guy in the middle. And he just doubled up, and the other guys looked and were horrified, and you know, and George just stood there and turned around and walked around them and kept going. That was a very, very famous thing that happened, and nobody else ever, well, the people who were there, none in the administration heard of it except, you know, little whispers. But, you know, he was capable of all kinds of things, you know. And
you probably couldn't get that in 5 minutes, though.
Yeah, right. No. I don't intend to do that one. but you know, there's just this breadth of behavior.
Well, as you know, that would have gotten him arrested today.
Oh God, yes.
Sure.
Oh my goodness. My brother-in-law is a teacher, and he's been called on the carpet of the principal for having told some guys in his class, don't call yourselves nigga. That's not a good thing to do. And all of a sudden he's in front of the principal being told that he demeaned these people, that he is creating some kind of tinderbox and on it. Good grief.
Mm.
Anyway,
Well, you know, there's a connection between coal miners and pepper.
oh,
Well, it's a long string.
uh-oh.
Originally, spaghetti carbonara was a bulked up spaghetti to feed coal miners. And so when carbonara is served, there's always pepper on the top of it. And that was actually because originally it was the dust from the coal miner's hat that got onto the spaghetti, and that's where the pepper came from. So I'm not suggesting that you include that, but it is an interesting piece of trivia.
Sure is.
That's why it's called carbonara.
I always wondered where the name came from. That's
As they would say in Silesian,
Yeah.
for reals? For reals?
Well, you've put an interesting twist on one of my absolutely favorite foods.
Yeah, me too. I know.
yes.
You
Yeah, I
didn't know that, Tom.
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that.
I do now.
Yeah.
Well, you might check it out. I mean, I didn't actually find this in the Encyclopedia Britannica or whatever, or the Encyclopedia Italica.
Right. Even if you just made it up, it's terrific.
It's a terrific story. It's a terrific story. I've got two questions to Ned, not about eulogy. I mean, you just gave the eulogy in less than 5 minutes. That whole story about the not the phalanx in the hallway, but the whole peppery stuff. But one is I've noticed his obituary hasn't yet appeared in the Times. Is there going to be one?
Oh yes, I don't know why it's not been published. His last partner, Henrito Vmassian, they had a wonderful relationship. Still have. Henry went from Armenian immigrant to UCLA law, and throughout atheist. How could anybody believe in a God? Through the system of communism, the educational system. And he was just clear that was a myth, that was not even a good myth. And now he's getting close to Catholicism, but now getting very close to Orthodox Christianity. He wrote the obituary. There's a declaration that is made by lawyers who need to impress a judge or the judge they're addressing with their competence, so that they will be awarded appropriately for having represented children with disabilities and having won the race. And Henry found one of those declarations and took a lot of the obituary from it. It's really impressive. I'll make sure you guys get it.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. I just
got an appointment. I gotta go, guys.
Okay.
okay. God bless.
The
Bob.
conversation. Take care.
Take good care, Bob. God bless.
So,
God bless you. Bye bye.
Ned, you mean special needs children? What we call special?
Yes. He was always upset because graduates of Loyola Law, who were very highly placed in, the pecking order in law school, as in other professions, is very, very, very important. Loyola Law is considered to be one of the best law schools in California. You know, never mind Stanford and UC.
Hastings.
And so George and I went to Loyola Law, and there were guys that finished lower in the pecking order and would get jobs at silk stocking law firms, either because of their connections or because they were tall, George would say. There was an incident. He had been called to interview with a very, very highly regarded international law firm, and showing up about the same time was one of his classmates. They graduated, got their degrees, passed the bar, and George said, "Hey, Steve, what are you doing here?" And he says, "Well, I've got an interview. I guess you're here for an interview too." And George said, "Yeah." George was levels above this guy, but this guy's father was a judge in the LA, the California system, and well known to the law firm. George interviewed, and I'm sure he let loose, you know, his inimitable wit and his really wonderful mind, and thought he had thought he got it from the responses of the three guys that were interviewing him. And then Steve went in, and within 2 days, George received the letter of regrets. But he did put on a good show, is a very good lawyer, and certainly will find a job, a first-year law job with one of the better law firms in Los Angeles. And Steve was picked. That's just the way it is, you know. So that was another bit of injustice that he was always railing against. Appearance, you know, tall, you know, remember, oh, Barney's tall, Barney Gatlin, one of the priests who taught us, B.J. McCoy was his name.
B.J. McCoy.
Yeah, he taught us history and God knows what else he thought he taught us. And he would talk about Barney Gatlin, 6'2", whatever the hell he was. Wonderful athlete, wonderful mind, kind of a reclusive. Well, we've talked about that. And B.J. McCoy would forgive anything that Barney did. And there were some substantial things that others would have gotten thrown out of the seminary for. And, oh, well, no, that's Barney. He's tall, you know.
Oh, that's...
Anyway.
Well, the reason I asked is because legislation or laws for disabled or special needs children is kind of close to my heart. 50 years ago, my brother was the chairman of the Education Committee in the Massachusetts legislature and wrote the first model Special Education Act for the country. It's called Massachusetts General Law 766. Wow. And it has millions and millions of people have gotten, children with special needs have gotten educated since, because it established the principle that every child deserves an education. And so my brother was relatively obscure man, but it was the one thing in his political career that really made him proud of the effort that he put in, and you know, makes me. I was at the 50th anniversary celebration in the State House in September, and the Secretary of Education called it one of the most important pieces of legislation ever passed in the Massachusetts legislature. So as you can see, I'm proud of that. It makes me sympathetic to when anyone talks about special needs children. So,
well, thanks for bringing me back to dead center to the question at hand. It wasn't, George's hiring. It was about children with disabilities, and he went to these. He did get hired by a silk stocking law firm. Learned the craft of lawyering from some of the best. One guy he hated for a couple of years, and then he grew to like him, and pretty soon they had a great friendship. Just this workaholic who died because of, he was never home. Anyway, George left the silk stocking law firm, went through 2 or 3 other law firms, smaller, very effective. They were all Jewish law firms. God, he learned all kinds of expressions, Jewish expressions, and schlep here and schlep there, and all, just all over. And wound up in another Jewish law firm that specialized in special education.
Oh, okay.
And at one point, and was very effective again. And here in the house, we had a barbecue, and another of our friends, Mike Clements, that we've talked about in the past, you may or may not remember, was an organizer for the Industrial Areas Foundation, and an organizer in Texas and in Fresno and Arizona, and all over Southern California, San Fernando, East Los Angeles, San Diego. Very effective guy. He was 6'4", and very bright, and very effective. And he was a close friend of both George's and mine. And he was in the barbecue. I mean, he came with his wife, Enedina, and I had just retired. Mike Clements was just in the process of retiring. And I had a friend, a businesswoman, who was very, very much involved in diocesan work. She really wanted to get deeply into social justice action in this orange, very liberal diocese. It was anything but liberal. And I don't know where I met her, but we formed a close friendship. And George was talking with Mike Clements. I'm making a short story long, as usual. George was talking with
5 minutes.
George was talking with Mike. Mike had a grandson, adopted grandson, who was about to be thrown out of school. He was big, tall, like Mike, Mexican kid, great basketball player, but erratic as hell. And he was going to be thrown out because Mike, who was raising him, he and Enedina were raising him, were told that he was a thug. He was no good, bad seed, terrible influence. Those kinds of things that he brought to and sprinkled around his class were terrible. And because he was such a good athlete, the seeds went into the kids, and they were throwing him out. And George turned around and said, "Hey, Ned, why don't you and Mike call a special education meeting, an IEP is called, Individual Education Plan meeting, and blow these guys out of the water. I'll help you." And I said, "Wow, that's a great idea." So I met with George. He gave me some books. He gave me some pointers. We put this meeting together, and I'm telling you, it was a knockdown, drag-out fight. They wanted to throw this asshole out. One of the teachers said that. "I'm never going to help this guy. He doesn't deserve any help. He deserves to be thrown out. He's a plague on our school. Well, slowly, that got turned around, and we got him a good education plan, and he graduated scholar, athlete from the high school. And that started me in special ed, and that's what I did for the next 17 years. With Mike Clements and this business friend of ours, with the three of us united. And George did that. He taught me to love those kids. And you know what? The parents, they're heroes. They're heroes, 24/7 with these children. Some have multiple children with disabilities. One dedicated couple, the men walk away very often from situations like this. The first case I had was a child who was deaf and blind. And I thought to myself, how can you even communicate with this guy? How does he get educated? And then, of course, what's her name? You guys know.
Yeah, it's on the tip of our tongue.
The famous woman who was deaf and blind and dumb, and
Helen Keller.
Helen Keller.
Helen Keller, yeah.
I was told all about Helen Keller and found out that there were all kinds of ways, through touch mostly, that these children can be educated into high levels and of academia. And we were able to get a really great program for this kid in San Francisco from Orange County. Orange County paying for it. The school that he went into was in San Francisco, and his mother, who was Spanish speaking only immigrant, but smart and tenacious, she learned English, I don't know, in record time, and got herself a VP job in a government program, and went on to lead that program. So there's no end to what can be done when you give it all. So George was the catalyst for that kind of stuff. Enough said, huh?
It's wonderful that you told that.
Yes, thank you. One other practical question. Have you or has anybody said anything about the live stream?
I was worried about it. I woke up this morning and I couldn't go back to sleep because of that. Nobody has said anything to me about it.
Okay.
The live stream.
And since we're talking practicalities,
Yeah.
for me, the rest of you probably have it down, but what are the actual details, the time and the dates? Again, I know it's like what? It's this Tuesday, Wednesday?
Wednesday, 7 p.m. Tuesday, vigil, rosary. Bishop will will pray the decades, and there will be reflections in between the decades, which he says will be the mysteries that will be meditated upon throughout the decades.
Got it. And Ned, it might or might not be live streamed?
I can't see why it wouldn't. Tom can tell you more.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the problem is I've had several calls into Father Rodell and then Father Ramon, who's the assistant pastor, and they never returned my calls.
Jeez.
So, I'm thinking after our thing, I'm just going to send an email and copy everybody on it. And I'll send it to Rodell's, he'll be the primary one, but I'll copy the parish business administrator and the coordinator for special events, who I think is the one who coordinates funerals, and probably I'll copy Parker also.
Yeah.
And just to see that somebody gets it, because I'd very much like to have an assurance. I can't see any problem with doing the funeral, but there shouldn't be any problem with doing the vigil either. I just like to have an assurance that I can send out to all of you then the information about logging on
Yes, that would be great.
and watching it.
And since we're doing practicalities, the time of the actual funeral on Wednesday is what time, please?
10 a.m.
Okay,
at Incarnation Church in Glendale. I'll send you another. I thought I had sent you these little flyers that tell it all, with a picture of George on top.
I'm just refreshing memory, and a lot of different stuff has crossed my desk, so that's really helpful. And just
Don't forget, Ned, you're dealing with a bunch of old guys here.
Yeah, don't forget, Ned, huh? Yeah, youngster among us.
And an old guy's trying to remember what he's supposed to be doing,
Yeah.
And one other practicality, Betty Crook's, does she go by formally? Does she go by Betty, or is it Elizabeth?
No, Betty.
It's Betty. Thank you.
So
And
you were going to send us her address as well, Ned.
I'm assuming it's the same one in Glendale,
Yes.
822 West Dryden.
It's
Yeah.
Dryden.
It's on the Friday Friends listing, so it's that one.
Yes, that's it.
But for anyone who wants to take notes, if you have it handy, or I have it right here too, I can just give it, and but it's on the
Okay.
on the lovely list that Tom
thanks.
made for us way back when, and has updated and sent out. So
It's 8, as you just said, Bob. 822 West Dryden, DRYDEN Street, Glendale, 91202. I'll send that little card to everybody again, and it's got everything in there.
Okay.
I'll do it right after this. Our talk.
yeah, Tom, brother Tom has it really down in terms of us old guys. In terms of, we can never get too many reminders.
Without Tom, we'd be lost.
That's for sure.
We can never. It's so gracious of you to do that, and I'm so grateful that you continue to do that. Just
My pleasure.
That's
Absolutely my pleasure.
Why they designed a snooze button and an alarm clock.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
That's
We remind you to get up.
Well, this is going to be kind of a milestone for me and in my life, later life. All the stuff that's been talked about, how it occurred, my conversations with one of George's kids, which just blew my mind, and I think I mentioned it a little to you guys. And he's called and wants to continue his relationship with his daughter is, I think I used the word mystical. There's no need for words to be spoken. I think I mentioned that the last day of his life, he's laying on this hospital bed that goes up and down and lifts the legs and lifts the back and all that kind of stuff. And Susan is lying on George and Betty's bed, which is right next to where the hospital bed was placed, and she's holding his hand, and she's crying, trying to make it. George never surfaced after that, and people are coming in and out, touching him and praying for him, from 75 pounds to 105 pounds. He was, and John. So that the connection between George and his daughter were, as Barron always says, are on display. And the relationship between him and his son, who's over in a corner, just pondering. He's an ultra sensitive guy, just observing. Betty coming in, touching George, saying a little prayer, kissing him, shedding a tear or two, and then leaving to continue with some of the logistical stuff that she's doing because there are other folks there. It was kind of a microcosm of the whole thing.
Do you, Ned, this may sound a little too techie, but at any rate, and in the scene that you're describing, what was George's level of consciousness, would you say?
Well,
was he responding at all at that point, or had he already started his journey home?
The journey was well on the way. This may be contradictory, but there were times when Betty would, bend down and whisper something in his ear, and his mouth began to, and nothing coming out, but it was moving, and it didn't move otherwise.
Yeah.
And Susan would touch and tenderly rub the back of his hand, and his head he was on his side, and his head would go up, and she would be whispering, and then the head would go down. But just hours after that, he was gone.
Right, and as you and I had chatted, and I really encourage you and the family at that point, be sure and hold his hand, touch, and talk to him, because all indications are that touch and hearing, and it's hard to tell which one, although the brain folk are saying it's touch that is the absolute last sensation to go, but hearing is also there. And so one of the things I always caution people around people who are in end stage and you think they're unconscious, because there've been too many experiences of literally part of the last words of some people were, "I heard that." No kidding. I heard that. Be careful what you say. And yeah. So he obviously, or from what you're saying, sounds like he was hearing what was going on still. And that often goes right up to very, very almost the very end. And he was trying to respond.
I really believe that. I seeing the responses, I really believe that he.
Some people say it actually goes beyond, the declaration of death for about 18 to 20 minutes. You can hear.
Right.
Wow.
Right, and it depends. Some Buddhists would say, and it goes on for another 30 days or so.
Wow.
And that's why, the traditions of sitting Shiva in the Jewish tradition, and even in our Catholic tradition of continuing to honor the body and not rush.
The month's mind mass.
The month's mind mass, yes.
Days,
Yeah. The seven, I remember in the French Canadian Catholic tradition growing up in Massachusetts and Leominster, that there would be a remembrance for the first 7 days for sure. And then later on, when I discovered, that in the Jewish tradition that they said Shiva for 7 days. Mm-hmm. That 7 is a sacred number. It's a special number, and who knows how long.
Mm-hmm. Anyway,
Ned,
interesting. That's much. Well,
go ahead.
No, I'm.
I just
because the Jewish tradition tries to bury people as soon as possible after death.
Yeah.
Right.
But and I guess the Muslim tradition does too. But they still believe that the soul or the spirit lingers and is capable of being ministered to, shall we say.
Mhm. That's a nice way of putting it.
Well, I talk to him all the time.
Yeah.
I bet you do.
I don't know how long that's going to last, but feels good to me.
I think it lasts. Frank may want to jump in. I think it lasts a very long time. I still talk to Mary Alice. Sometimes I go, gosh, if someone walked in and heard me talking with her.
Well, you know,
Yeah,
that,
well, that
again,
I agree with that. In fact, I had an old Trappist priest once who gave me as a penance that I should convene a meeting between Jesus, Janice, and me.
Oh, how, wow. Oh, wow. I didn't
When I because of turmoil in my family, lived with my grandmother in Pennsylvania, leaving California and staying there. I used to sleep on a kind of landing near her bedroom, and she would have big conversations with Pop, her husband, laughing, having jokes and so forth. It was amazing to me.
Wow. That's what
So even though we can't see him in the frame, he's probably here with us. He
Yeah.
wouldn't miss if he is one to
we're all over the place, you know.
the
Yeah.
Fratelli. I got to meet the Fratelli.
Sprinkle.
Yes,
Well-
thanks for that, Frank. That's a really helpful reminder.
yeah, I think so. And, you know,
Echo.
Bob, a few weeks ago, you recommended that book Now,
Uh-huh,
and I'm probably a third of the way through it,
uh-huh.
and maybe halfway. But, you know, more and more, it's becoming obvious to me that, you know, time is bound up with our material universe.
Mhm. Mhm.
And if there's one thing that our faith tells us, when you die, your spirit steps out of that direct relationship with the material universe, and therefore steps out of this direct relationship, or shall we say, dependence on whatever the glorified body may be. There's kind of evidence, you know, scripture even, that it is not a material body. It's not dependent on materiality, physicality. Therefore, it's not limited to time or to space or materialness. So, you know, I think part of our faith needs to be that when we step into the realm of God, we are no longer dependent on the materiality of existence. That doesn't mean that we can't interface with it, but that time is no longer something that binds us. Place is no longer something that binds us. You know, like that insight that I shared some weeks ago, that it certainly looks from the Gospels that the journey to Emmaus and the apparition of Jesus in the upper room happened at the same time.
Who's your friend there, Tom?
Oh, I'm sorry. That's my friend Karen. And she's roaming. She's probably been banished from the house. Karen, come and say hello to everybody, except let me see if I can get the sound from these. The phone is ringing. Okay.
It would be
Let me
nice
see
if she'd like to just say hello.
Yeah. I think here we can.
She's important in
say-
life.
Say hello.
Hello, everybody. Sorry,
Hi,
I didn't
Karen.
realize that I
Hi,
was on
Karen.
candid camera here.
Hi, Karen.
Hi, Karen.
Can you hear them?
No,
Okay.
Just tell her we're saying hi.
Yeah, they're saying hi. Yeah, I don't want to cut you all off if I
Yeah.
stop the
no,
earbuds, but
I'm gonna go finish looking at my plants.
okay,
All right, take care. God
Yeah.
bless.
all right.
You too.
And the plant lady too. How about that?
She definitely is a plant lady. Let me get us back onto
You're good, Tom.
oh, AirPods.
Audio and
Okay.
video is fine.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We're okay.
good.
Yeah, I see now. I could have put it on the speaker too, but I'm still learning all this stuff.
Well, you're doing a good job. Thank you for
Pretty-
that.
Keep
pretty
trying.
impressive. Pretty impressive.
We'll keep
Can I
trying.
shift a bit and ask Fred 2 questions? How much of what we've been discussing ever gets into your students? And number 2, how was the wrapping up of the school year for you?
Well, basically, the last thing the students had to do, the 38 students in my God, Self, and Society class, had to write a paper on what I called that for the sake of which. And that for the sake of which is that for the sake of which you decide and do everything. And ideally, it would be God. So the basic distinction is between God and what's an idol. But it's what's really clear is that BC no longer has a majority of students who come from deeply religious families. It's such a change from when I started 50 years ago. I think I've said this before, but 50 years ago, I could ask a class, did they have someone in their family whom they knew, whether it was a grandparent or aunt or uncle or so forth, who constantly prayed? And they would always raise their hand. They had somebody. It wouldn't work anymore. So when they had to write about that for the sake of which they decide and do everything, a rather large number of them really say, and it's a wonderful thing too, that they think about their family and friends and people that they want to help. And so that kind of goes with the motto of BC, which is men and women for others. Yeah. And you always remember Matthew 25, if you did it for the least of these, my brethren, you did it for me. So I feel like all those kids are home free, so to speak.
Now, sounds like prayer with legs.
No, but also it's the thing that I'm convinced that when Jesus was crucified, he sent the Holy Spirit to everyone in the totality of world history, because as Tom was just saying, when you get into the spiritual sphere, it's completely unconditioned by space and time. So there's no problem for Jesus to send the Spirit to everybody who ever lived.
I don't know, Fred. I think it's just for some.
Okay.
That's really meant to be tongue in cheek, because it's one of the annoyances I have at so many masses where we're praying for, for not for the many, for some, not for all, just for some. And you sure now? I'm being ironic, I hope.
I understand.
Because I couldn't agree with you more and more and more.
I'm sure the Holy Spirit prompts people to be ironic. He doesn't mind.
She doesn't.
Or she doesn't, whatever you say. So So that was a wonderful thing, correcting all those papers for the end of the year, because you really realize that the vast majority of your students are really salt of the earth people. And that it's an honor and a pleasure to be able to teach people like that. And I would say it's a wonderful thing that BC draws people like that to come to college there. And so it really is a boon for me to be able to teach people at BC that way. The other students, I teach a perspectives program called New Horizons in the Social Sciences. And the social sciences include political science, sociology, economics, and political theory. I think I said that. And so they write papers that have to do with that. And they really wrote wonderful papers. A lot of them chose to write on Marx. And they really did so in a very balanced way. They realized that he had a concern for the losers in society, and this is something that still is true in our country now. This tremendous gap between 16% of the people own 66% of the wealth in our country, and they're not about to share it. And so there are a lot of people that are just utterly left out. There's a book by a man named William Desmond called Poverty, and he goes into great detail in analyzing and keeping track of that. So I'm very happy in a certain sense that the students in the class get exposed to these kind of facts about how lucky they are compared to so many people. 1 in 8 people who go to bed hungry every night, according to Desmond. And so they have to realize what Tom was talking about in terms of that there is the reality that's not conditioned by space and time, but there's their reality, which is extrinsically conditioned by space and time, meaning that you as long as you have a body and all the things that go with the body, you are not only in relation to what isn't conditioned by space and time, but you're also in relation to, you're extrinsically conditioned by space and time. And that is a big deal. It's a gift to be incarnate. And so so the kids in the Horizons course really did concentrate on this gap between the rich and the poor, which so many of the sciences are, sociology in particular, but economics as well, are involved with. Unfortunately, economics is really a mess. And so I was fortunate that Father Lonergan felt that. So for 14 years, he tried to study economics and then write a text about economics. I edited a book about that for him. I co-edited it, and so I kind of introduced them to what he's talking about in that book. And he clearly had knows that he had the same concern as Marx, so that you have two kinds of production: capital production, which is producing producer goods, and the producer goods are used for the production of consumer goods. And the purpose of an economy, of an industrial economy, is to raise the standard of living for everyone. It's not for profit. It's not, there's nothing wrong with having a profit, but to make profit the be all and end all is stupid. Of course, people think it's smart, but because of the way they're socialized and acculturated in the United States. But so it really is doing Marx better than Marx, and that was a wonderful experience for me to, in Lonergan's final years of teaching at BC, he taught on macroeconomics, and he made me realize that now, instead of having strictly an industrial economy, we have a financialized economy in which so many people are making money from money, and it's not doing any good to raise the status of the common good. So I introduce students to that. And then on the other hand, when I talk about law, I particularly talk about the fact that law, to an overwhelming extent, and Ned would agree with this, it has to do with rhetoric. It has to do with constitutive rhetoric. And we've been hearing in the talk about George how he realized that so clearly in relation to people who had specific difficulties with life. And he was, in a certain sense, a doctor for people like those people, and just this wonderful heart, whether it was in the name of Jesus, which I'm sure it was, or in the name of FDR, he was on the right track. and you can't help but love a guy like that.
Yeah.
So that's too much talk about what I've been doing.
No, that's super.
Fred, I have a couple of questions. Do you think Marx was familiar with the Acts of the Apostles?
I have no idea. It's a problem because, of course, he was Jewish ethnically, but he was raised in some form of Protestantism.
Mm-hmm.
And Protestantism tended to be a bourgeois affair in Europe.
Yeah.
Max Weber's thing about capitalism and Protestantism pretty much tells, I think, what's a pretty true story.
Yeah.
And so you don't have this. You do, of course, Protestants have a concern for social justice, but it's not as focal as it is, luckily, in the Catholic social justice tradition.
Right.
And not that Protestants, like Sue and I had very dear friends who were Baptists, and when there was some disaster somewhere, they would all work together to fill up a big trailer full of food and clothing and things that people would need, and send it to that place. Just there, one church did that.
Yeah.
And so it's not that it's foreign to Protestants, but there's a different way of, it seems to me, conceiving of the whole relationship between people in the economic sphere. So you have when you go to mass in the morning, Sunday morning, all these people of all different types are there at church, and you have business people. And my sense is that the business people who are there are not thinking in the mass, are not thinking about the clock that's going on their interest rate.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
They seem to me, just externally speaking, but one people specifically, they really take the faith seriously, and also really care about the poor. This reminds me of a story I'll share with you. I had the student body president in my class one year, and one time after class, she told me she thought her father was losing his faith, and I had just read that who's the famous Jesuit from Ireland, the poet Gerard Manley Hopkins, and when he counseled people who were losing their faith, his advice was 2 words: give alms. So this girl came and said her father was losing his faith. And I told her the story about what Gerard Manley Hopkins said. And so he decided to go work for the Catholic Worker in his free time. And she came at the end of the semester and said, he's not losing his faith anymore. So it's a nice result, I think.
One of the things, a practical thing that happened in business on the financialization of the process was the original classic business theory was you make a product, you service your customers, you respect your employees and the community. And if you do all those things really well, you'll make a good profit and you share it with the shareholders. So they're at the end of the process. About 25 years ago, there was introduced this thing called shareholder value, where the shareholder was put at the beginning of the process. And therefore, the results began to become, you cut corners on the product, you cut back on the service, you reduce the number of benefits you give to employees, et cetera, in order that you could maximize a preordained value that you gave to the shareholder.
Oh my God.
And that had enormous effect. I remember going to the chief financial officer of my company and saying, I think this is going to lead to our employees cutting corners. We're going to get into trouble. And he just blew me off. And it seems to me that was the kind of the financialization of the classic Milton Friedman kind of thing about profit that was classically changed when the shareholder was moved from the end of the process to the beginning of it.
Wow. Yeah. Thanks for telling that story.
May I remind you of something I think I said to you before? Toward the end of my tenure at Unocal, the very large international oil company, I was running the law department for the largest part of that company. And the CEO, who was a Catholic, was going to be retiring. And he was one of the very few top executives that appreciated and showed his appreciation of and to the law department. And he invited us. He had a very large home in Arrowhead, and invited the law department for a couple of days up there. And he had a really great boat that he took us all, in little pieces throughout the lake. And then we had to finish up our trip there, a very large, sumptuous dinner at the country club there. And toward the end of the meal, he got up and said, "I have to tell you something. I'm retiring, as you know, but we're entering into a world of hunters and killers." And everybody just, what? These are lawyers from Netherlands and Europe and South America, and he said, we used to have 5 constituents. We had people who consume our products, people who help us make our products, contractors, the community that we worked with, our workers, the people who have jobs with us, and I forget what the 5th one was. And he said, I became CEO thinking that we could, and the shareholders, of course. And he said, the shareholders received what was produced by all of those other constituents, working in harmony and doing the best they could to raise the lives of people as we could. And now, just exactly what you said, Fred, now none of those constituencies are in the forefront. The constituency that we now serve is the shareholder. The shareholder wants money, and the shareholder wants it now, not to develop some product or not to develop some distribution system or whatever else we do over a period of time that will raise the level of life, but now find out how to make the money now and distribute it now. And you're going to be seeing videos that will attempt to inform you about this new company that I'm sure will develop when I'm out of here. I'm glad to leave now. And shortly thereafter, we began to see videos, particularly for the guys that were in the executive level, of Africa, a jungle, an antelope herd, and a cheetah or a tiger finally chasing one or two of the antelopes, and it was it was edited in such a way that you could see how rapacious, how hungry, how fast, how the animal was against the antelope. And finally, after pivoting here and there and running and almost getting the antelope and missing, and finally got the antelope, grabbed the neck, bore down and killed it. And we were told, that's business now.
Quite edifying.
Pardon me? Yeah, quite edifying. Scared the hell out of us. You will not, or anybody that comes into Unical from now on, this will not be your final job. You will, in your lives, you must expect to have 3 or 4 or 5 jobs, moving from one place to the next to the next. And he said, I'm so sorry to have to tell you that, but that's the way it is and will be. And you guys are just, it's a confirmation here. It's awful. My son is a doctor, and he has experienced the financialization of medicine.
Mhm.
And he's hurting, just hurting. Doesn't know how to handle it.
And that's a sad thing to see about that. So many things, so many areas of our lives that once were serving people. Now they're not serving people, they're serving themselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The market determines the value system that invades everything in our lives. There's a book by Michael Sandel, who's at Harvard Business School, and I think it's What Money Can't Buy. And there really isn't anything that it can't buy.
Wow.
So,
Annika. Fred,
Yes.
this is what you've been, what kind of grade would you give Ned for that rendition of That for the Sake of Which? This is where we live these days, society, economics. That's the idol.
Yeah. Well, that's why I enjoy this group so much, because nobody here is that way.
Fred, can I ask another question? It might take a little different direction, but I'm fascinated by the conclusion you came to about the students, even though they weren't confessionally Catholic like they were when you first went to BC. But in fact, they were thinking, they were showing they had a soul in their responses. What are the implications of that for evangelization?
That's a
God.
great question.
A hell of a question.
What I think is true is that they need to have some kind of discipline of prayer in order to realize that there's a relationship between their relationship to God and their relationship to the things that they're already involved with in the goodness of their hearts. So I always tell the students that I believe that all of them have the Holy Spirit in them, and that when they have good inclinations, that's prompted by the Holy Spirit. And the thing to do is, it has so much to do with feelings. So I have a kind of diagram that I put up on the board sometimes. It's in Greek, to bullshit them. Pathos, logos, ethos. Pathos is feelings. Everything starts with feelings. And if there's anything that's affected by the Holy Spirit, it's your feelings. Logos is understanding the situation and the circumstances of your life in relation to everyone else with whom we're related, which is virtually everyone. And then ethos means a way of life that's based on a correct understanding and rightly oriented feelings. So feelings are crucial. See? So when, like, I had trouble getting on this thing today at precisely the time that 1 o'clock here it is. And I remember feeling bad because I wondered if it was going to happen. You see what I'm trying to say? And feelings, as we experience every week in this group, it's the framework of our conversation. Feelings, in a certain sense, lead the way. And if we have a right orientation, then the types of questions and issues we face together will emerge, and we'll share about about those things. And so I think I think there's a certain sense in which we're almost blessed because the way of life question is already solved. So in other words, Ned's not going to have anything to do with the animal that attacks the other animal and eats it. It's not, it has absolutely the opposite appeal to him as the person who's saying, watch this. This is life, because it's really death. So feelings are so crucial. They're the context, or they're what makes communication possible and helpful. And of course, you could. So that's a thing that I was noticing about that story about that student who was going to be kicked out of school because he was a problem in a certain way. That George, when he encountered problems like that, he had a kind of what you might call a kind of X-ray vision of what the real situation was, and he was able to respond in an intelligent and reasonable and responsible way to those kinds of situations, and to do it without any what would you call it? You know, when people, you know, people who do good things, but they're always patting themselves on the back. That wasn't George. So in other words, they use that expression to be the salt of the earth. That's what George was, and that's what I feel like each one of you are. Doing palliative care, the delicacy and the type of attentiveness you have to use to take care of palliative care in the right way. To be a pastor, like to kids and the Spanish speakers like Norman is. It seems to me every one of you have the feelings in the right orientation, and they fit into your whole way of life, your whole way of asking questions and getting answers and so forth. I can't tell you how delightful it is for me to be together with you guys each Friday.
Well, I agree with you, and I think that that's one of the most beautiful things about this group that's gathering is that we are people who care. We don't care about becoming rich or becoming famous. We care about taking care of people around us and caring for the people around us. And it's obvious with the way that we want so much to serve at the funeral for George, because it's going to be a special moment caring for him and his family.
Thank you. That was a good.
Also, Fred, I think what the last few minutes have been one of the best Pentecostal reflections I think I have heard in a very long time. And the role of the Holy Spirit in all of this, especially the addressing of feelings, the fundamental reality that makes us human, that we have feelings and that we can reflect on those feelings and act on them. But you just pulled some stuff together that just was absolutely beautiful.
You're reminding me of a time when I was going up for tenure, and I had to have the last conversation with my faculty. I was worried about how that might go. And I told Lonergan happened to be at BC that time, and I told him I'm a little worried about this thing that I have to do before going up for tenure. And Lonergan said, You remember what it says? Dabitur vobis. It'll be given to you what to say. So, I think he had more faith in that than I did, but at any rate, worked out.
Fred, in order to kind of help me mull over, incorporate into as much of what you've said and not said really in the words you've used in the situation, is there any prayer or book or aid that would make those kinds of realities clear? I'm thinking about my grandkids. I have 7 boys and 3 girls, and I would love to be able to give them this. We had lunch, my wife and I, Daly and I had lunch yesterday with our oldest, and he has developed a twitch in his left cheek. He's got a 5.0. He's taken all advanced placement classes. I mean, he's a really, really bright academic, and his pop has unfortunately communicated to him the rapaciousness of the world, because he's had to live through it and tried to keep balanced in it. And he kept saying to us during the lunch, we've had this conversation before, Grandma and Grandpa. We can't be certain of anything. We cannot be certain of anything. Now, I'm not going to live that way, but nothing is for sure. Science keeps getting deeper into reality, but there really isn't any kind of reality that we can count on. And you can see the anxiety. He's a junior and he's going into senior year. And he said some of the more thoughtful people that I, hang out with in school.
Which one was he, David or Daniel?
What did he say?
His son, he's Daniel's son, the doctor.
What did he come out?
And the MD, I should say. We just listened and came home and prayed for him. So it's balance.
That's what I like so much about the prayer of St. Francis. Give me an instrument of your peace. There's hatred, let me bring love, and so on. It's just so beautiful that saying that we have a vocation, a call, to be different than what the way the world thinks. And that's St. Francis thinks so clearly.
I love that prayer too, but what I'm thinking about right now is feelings, the basis for communication, logos, understanding, and ethos, as you said, Fred. How is there something that would confirm, expand, help integrate so that it just sort of comes out? Does that make that didn't make any sense?
He's talking right now. The living human document of Ned. How lucky that grandson is to have you as a grandpa. You are the book. You're the walking, talking, living, loving book. There is no book that could be written that would be better than you.
I just wonder about, listening to Grandpa.
Have him call Bob.
I'll be happy to tell him.
Call Bob.
I'll be happy. I'll be happy to tell him. But Ned, you don't have to do anything else. You don't have to do it. You don't have to find any book or anything. You is it, man. You're the one. You're doing it for him.
That's a wonderful hope. But he's not listening to me every day or even every week. He's listening. He's out there in this fucked up secular world that I don't know. I know I have overcome the world, he said. But right now it's in a phase of just fire, and it attracts, at least to give people who kind of interpret what's going on, a whole lot of fear, or a whole lot of empty, not enjoyment, but activity. I don't know, just mindless activity. It just worries the hell out of me. And, I mean, we've got a little time left.
You made me think about my own grandchildren, 8 of them. And a thing that really has helped them, and it seems to be a splendid thing, is that they're all into sports. And that really helps them. In a certain sense, they look forward to these games, and they are really into it. And that's been true for almost all their lives, because my son gets them into it, was a coach for them for many years. And so, for example, my oldest grandson, who's a freshman in high school, Brookline High, he now, his father was a national. He was in the Spain's national rugby team.
Oh,
Now he's starting to play rugby, and my bedroom is right next to his room, and I heard one day that his coach put him in a certain position, and he was telling his father that, and his father explained, well, here's what you have to do when you're in that position. Here are the different things that can happen, and so forth and so on. And it's just such a wonderful thing that sports can play, but not everybody's into sports, and so the other thing is he interested in art?
Peripherally, yeah, he's trying, the idea thing that his dad's always pushed him to get, to understand. But mostly it's preparation for getting into a good university, and he wants to go out there and make some money to help his family, and to find a position in this world that will give him some kind of influence.
It sounds like he has his head on his shoulders. But also what you said about what we've been in general speaking about the certain cutthroat aspect of the world.
Oh God, yeah.
So I think I don't think I ever had that kind of thought or that kind of worry. And so it kills me to hear about this twitch and this nervousness about what's going to happen. Our culture and our meanings and values that he knows he's going to have to confront are really so dreadful, unfortunately, that I really don't know what to say. Except I do want to tell you, every night I pray for Daniel and David. along with you and Darlene, and everybody else here in this group.
That's one of the biggest comforts I think we all have, is that we really do love each other, and we really do care for each other and do for each other. This has been just a providential serendipity that's occurred, and it's so wonderful. So, and we got Tom that makes it happen. It's just so wonderful.
Well, servant of the servants of God, maybe.
And there are moments that those of us who are at great distances feel pain that we can't be with you in person or be together.
And lift the Negroni too.
Where my miner's at.
But it's
Yeah,
obvious in the way that we're caring about George and Betty,
Yes.
you know, very
Yes,
obvious.
absolutely. Yeah.
I'd like to ask something maybe in conclusion, and specifically ask it of Ned, but really ask of everyone else too. It seems to me that it would be tremendously helpful to share this video in particular, as well as the video of the Mass, at least you know, our homily and our discussion afterwards, with the bishop.
Oh,
Would you like to do it? Would you like me to do it? Do you think it's a good idea? I think he could gain tremendous insight on just what was a very integral part of George's last 2 years. And
I don't have a problem with it.
I neither.
You what, Frank?
Same here.
I do not. I
a
have no
problem.
problem here.
I think it's a great idea, frankly. You know, he's his own self.
Yeah.
And I don't know to what extent he would do that, but I think with the folks that are here, that might, you know, push him over the top.
well, let me maybe it would be good if I send it to him, and I can
I
kind
agree.
of introduce myself as
I
what my
agree.
relationship has been with George and with
And
him.
if you can excuse me for a second, Tom, knowing how busy a bishop is, maybe you can make sure he knows he can take it in 20-minute chunks or something like that.
He can also speed it up on
Oh,
YouTube. Yeah, but he's a retired bishop. He's not,
Yeah.
you know, which means that he's busier, probably.
Probably, yeah.
Okay, I will do that once we get all of this processed. I'll send him a note and an email. And
And the streaming stuff, Tom.
yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
I mentioned to you that Tom Cotton asked because there are apparently lots of people that want to tap into the Mass, the liturgy, and are disabled, and therefore, you know.
And Ned, if you get a chance to put in a good word that could go through the powers that be, through the family, or you know, the dealings that they would have, that would be good too, so that we can just be sure that it happens.
Yeah, I'm given what we know about Parker Sandoval, his position, his residency there at Incarnation. He's in France right now, I think. I think I'm going to send him either a text or an email that hopefully, you know, briefly but effectively asks for his help on that. Okay.
Okay, we'll be. Shall we conclude with a prayer?
Amen.
How about come, Holy Spirit, join me, fill the hearts of your faithful, and enkindle in
Kindle
us
in
the fire
fire
of your love.
of your
Send forth your spirit. We shall be recreated
created.
and renew the face of the earth. Amen.
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 Happy Pentecost.
And happy
Okay.
Pentecost to you all. And our cleaners are just finishing up also. So
Good timing.
now I'm going to have to take my shoes off and going in the house.
Uh-oh.
Have a great day. You deserve it.
Yeah.
All
God
right.
bless you. Thank you.
Goodbye.
That's all of you.
Everybody.
God bless.